In case you've been keeping score, the Soul Calibur series of fighting games is quietly celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. The original Soul Edge emerged in arcades as Namco's sort of spin-off to its popular Tekken series of fighting games, only Soul Edge had weapons. But it wasn't until Soul Calibur came out for the Dreamcast back in '99 that Soul Calibur became explosively popular. Now we've come to Soul Calibur 3, a game that leans heavily on the same gameplay that makes Soul Calibur an undisputed classic. Soul Calibur 3 looks fantastic and features a whole bunch of new modes of play, but most of these aren't that great, and the differences to the underlying gameplay are pretty subtle. The 3 new characters in Soul Calibur 3 bring the entire cast up to around 30, which is a good-sized roster of deep and interesting fighting game characters. Some of the characters who used to be really similar to other characters on the roster are less so now, so guys like Siegfried and Nightmare, who used to play a lot alike, are less so now. Even though each character has dozens of different moves, they're all pretty easy to execute and just require a simple combination of controller moves and button presses. So it's easy to pull off a lot of fancy moves, and it's also easy to switch between different characters and basically get a sense of how to play the new one. There's a noticeable number of new moves for everybody, but there's the same underlying depth of play that's made Soul Calibur such a classic in the genre. This is some fast and technical action, and it's all about mixing up your high and low hits and trying to break through the opponent's defense with a good offense, but at the same time you can punish overly aggressive players with guard impact moves that deflect their attacks, and of course you've got plenty of unblockable moves and guard crushing moves and all kinds of stuff, so every single character has a variety of tactics available and all kinds of potential for different combos and attacking the opponent while he's downed and basically dealing with any situation with a variety of different options. This is all going to be pretty familiar territory if you've been playing Soul Calibur for a while, but if you've played an awful lot of Soul Calibur, you'll pick up on some of the nuances of what makes Soul Calibur 3 a little different than the previous games. The guard impact system is a little different than before, and at the same time it's easier to punish players who are overly hesitant or defensive now. So you've got things like walls where you can bash the player against them and continue your combo, and you could also really punish someone who doesn't pick himself up off the ground after getting knocked down. The thing is, Soul Calibur 3 is definitely a case of deja vu all over again, despite a lot of the changes. That's partly because you'll be looking at a lot of the same recycled animations that you've been seeing for years and years now, and the combat just doesn't have the same oomph to it as it used to. It doesn't pack the same wallop as maybe you remember from playing Soul Calibur in the past. None of these bladed weapons still draw blood or anything like that, so the action itself feels fairly tame. It's not like changing around the animations just for the sake of it would have made Soul Calibur 3 a better game, but still, if you've been keeping up with this series, you'll wish that some of this stuff looked a little different this time around. On the plus side, you've got the new fighters who include Zasalamel, Tira, and Setsuka. These guys fit in pretty well with the remaining cast, and they'll serve as good alternates probably for at least one of your favorite characters. The new fighters are probably the biggest attraction, but Soul Calibur 3 also tries to draw you in with a bunch of new single-player modes. The story mode is called Tales of Swords, and it lets you play through a little story for each of the different characters, but you'll find that the stories are pretty much alike for a lot of the different characters, and they recycle a lot of the same cutscenes from one character to the next. So this mode turns out to be pretty bland, especially since it's just got a lot of text for you to read. The other big new single-player mode is called Chronicles of the Sword, which is a cross between Soul Calibur gameplay and real-time strategy. This sounds pretty exciting offhand, but it actually pretty much falls apart in the execution since you've got pretty long loading times between battles and there's just a whole lot of waiting around in general. But this thing is definitely better in theory than it is in practice. Besides all that, you've got some kind of gimmicky arena matches and some tournament-style modes, and you could play these mock tournaments against computer opponents or with other players if you like. But since there's no online play in Soul Calibur 3, the idea of having this tournament-style gameplay built right into the game feels like it's definitely not fulfilling all of its potential. Through it all, you're earning gold, which you can use to unlock different types of options and different outfits for your created characters, which are another new feature of Soul Calibur 3. Actually, these created characters, which seem like a really cool idea for a fighting game like this, also aren't all that great in execution because they just seem like they're cookie-cutter versions of the main characters of the game, so you'll very quickly want to go back to playing as the main characters of Soul Calibur 3 after dabbling with the new created characters. It bears repeating, though, that the underlying gameplay of Soul Calibur 3 absolutely still holds up. it's still fantastic. So if you play this game with a friend of similar skill level, or even against the AI, which does a pretty good job of fighting you back, you'll have a lot of fun. So just get over all these new kind of throwaway modes that are in here and get on back to playing the versus mode just like you always did. Just don't expect for it to be radically different from the stuff you've been playing for a long time now. Soul Calibur 3 is still one of the most sophisticated fighting games around, but that's partly because a lot of its competition has dropped off. It looks fantastic and sounds great too, though unless you've been playing Soul Calibur for years already, it's hard to imagine why you'd want to start playing it now. And if you have been playing it all along, chances are you'll still enjoy it a great deal, just not quite as much as you used to. That's not because you don't like fighting games anymore, it's just because you'd reasonably expect a series like Soul Calibur to change or evolve more quickly than it has been.